The Iraqi city of Ramadi this morning is in the hands of ISIS. The extremist group took over the provincial capital despite support for Iraqi ground forces from U.S. airstrikes. But ISIS suffered a setback in eastern Syria when U.S. Special Operations Forces killed a leader described as the ISIS chief financial officer. His wife was captured. Former Secretary of Defense Robert Gates wrote about his 4.5 years leading the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan as Secretary of Defense in his book, Duty. It is now in paperback. Secretary Gates, good morning.
Good morning.
It's good to see you again.
And you as well.
What should we do today in Iraq first and then Syria when it looks like ISIS is gaining control of such an important city in the Anbar province?
I think, first of all, we need to change the rules of engagement for our troops. I think we don't need a significant increase in troops, in my view, but how they're used needs to be changed. I think that we need to be able to use them as forward air controllers or spotters for our aircraft. We need to have trainers embedded probably down to the battalion level in the Iraqi security forces, but I would say also with the Anbar tribes and with the Kurds. And we need to provide more opportunities for our special forces. I think that the idea to be able to operate behind the lines in Iraq and in support of what the Iraqi security forces are doing. I think the idea of that this battle fundamentally is going to have to be carried out by the Arabs, by the Iraqis themselves, whether they're Sunnis or Shia or Kurds, is fundamental. I agree with that. But I think there are things we can do that would make our help more effective.
Can I ask you about that, Secretary Gates? Because I was struck by this fact that I read this morning, that over the past month, 165 U.S.-led airstrikes were conducted on Ramadi to assist Iraqi troops. That's a lot of airstrikes.
Well, I think what it shows is that airstrikes can certainly help, but they don't really change the situation on the ground in a fundamental way. They are an important aspect of a military campaign, but you can't do it all just by air power.
Okay, and so does that say something about the failure of U.S. strategy against ISIS? Because it is largely airstrike driven. It's driven by the air. That's mostly what we're doing is airstrikes.
Well, I think it goes back to what I was just saying. I think that we need how we use the limited number of ground forces that we have in Iraq needs to be changed.
So what do you think we can learn from this weekend?
Well, I think that it's a reminder that we have a long way to go with the Iraqi security forces, and that even though we can have some tactical successes like killing this ISIS leader, that doesn't change the overall situation on the ground. And fundamentally, we're going to have to figure out a better way, or a faster or a bigger way, to help the Iraqi security forces.
Let's talk about Iran, but in the negotiations that are going on about nuclear weapons. But first, Lindsey Graham was just here, and he said that what they ought to do in Syria is get 100,000 troops from Arab countries on the ground in Syria and get Assad out of power, transition out perhaps, but what's essential is 100,000 troops from Arab countries. Is that feasible?
Not in my view. I think that I was going to say that getting 100,000 Arab troops in Syria is a lot easier said than done. And you know, the Arabs have no experience fighting together. And if we've learned one thing, it's the importance of integrated training and working together in these things. And you know, the truth is, in 1991, during the Gulf War, most of the fighting was done by the U.S. and the British. The others played a contributing role, but the fact is that getting 100,000 Arabs to come into Syria, I think, is a very tall order.
Just on Iran, because we have this deadline coming out about Iran negotiations, and we saw last week these leaders of Gulf countries meet with President Obama at Camp David to certainly try and they're deeply concerned about any sort of deal with Iran. I heard, and I know Charlie heard from many of them, that this was a very successful summit, that they felt like they've never spent 5.5 hours, 6 hours alone with the president. They felt reassured on a number of fronts. What do you think happens now with an Iran deal?
Well, first of all, I think it's a kind of a sad commentary that afterward they thought to themselves in the 7th year of presidency, gee, we should have done this a long time ago. This is pretty late in coming. I think that it probably was successful, but we'll see what happens subsequently. I don't think, my guess is that their concerns about an Iranian nuclear capability were not much alleviated.
I saw you on Face the Nation yesterday, and you said you really, frankly, aren't that impressed with the foreign policy positions on most of the candidates. Does that include Hillary Clinton, who you've worked with?
Well, I was asked about the Republican candidates. I'm disappointed that Secretary Clinton has not spoken out in favor of the trade agreements, for example. I think that the trade authority that the president is seeking is very important to us, not just economically, but politically and in terms of our security. On the Republican side, they've had jobs that really don't involve foreign policy. And so, as I told Bob Schieffer, I think that over time, their positions presumably will be fleshed out and become better.
You think it's possible to have a nuclear deal that would meet your conditions?
I think that based on the deal that we're having, that the deal as it appears now has some serious shortcomings. My hope is those can be addressed this month and next month in negotiations. And it has to do with the pacing of lifting the sanctions. It has to do with whether that you can actually reimpose sanctions, the verification. So there are some big issues.
Secretary Robert Gates, always a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you very much.